With revenue from college football at an unprecedented $3.4 billion annually, universities across the country invest millions each year in recruitment efforts for high school football players. But with talented players typically receiving multiple scholarship offers, team rosters are in limbo until student athletes commit to a university. Our survivors have told me many times that hate starts small and it grows when your neighbors, workmates, and friends ignore it and do nothing. Hate triumphs when intolerance and prejudice become ingrained across an entire society, from the pages of newspapers to the halls of government, from schoolrooms to boardrooms. For example, students might try to enroll for the free year despite having previously studied and therefore being ineligible. The report said the government held no records of study from before 2003 in order to verify eligibility, meaning it would have to rely on students' declarations. For example, students might try to enroll for the free year despite having previously studied and therefore being ineligible. The report said the government held no records of study from before 2003 in order to verify eligibility, meaning it would have to rely on students' declarations. The so-called continuing resolution keeps the government funded until 8th February in the hope that Congress can reach a longer-term budget agreement in the meantime. Thousands of federal employees who had been placed on temporary, unpaid leave since Saturday breathed a sigh of relief. How do we imagine the unimaginable if we are asked to think of an object, say, a yellow tulip? A picture immediately forms in our mind's eye. But what if we try to imagine a concept such as the square root of a negative number? Conservationists in New Zealand have come up with a novel way of raising money for one of the country's lesser-known endangered bird species by holding a race to see which male has the fastest sperm. The Great Sperm Race will pit samples from birds collected from 4 different bird colonies, and donors can place a 10 NZ dollar bet on which of the 128 samples swims the fastest. Conservationists in New Zealand have come up with a novel way of raising money for one of the country's lesser-known endangered bird species by holding a race to see which male has the fastest sperm. The Great Sperm Race will pit samples from birds collected from 4 different bird colonies, and donors can place a 10 NZ dollar bet on which of the 128 samples swims the fastest. Every culture is riddled with unwritten rules, such as ones on punctuality. They are the invisible scaffold that frames the behavior of individuals so that the collective can function in a frictionless and productive way. But the rigor of these rules and the exactitude with which they are enforced varies dramatically.
Over the centuries, the holiday evolved, and by the 18th century, gift-giving and exchanging handmade cards on Valentine's Day had become common in England. Handmade Valentine's cards made of lace, ribbons, and featuring cupids and hearts eventually spread to the American colonies.
Ford made a U-turn, scrapping plans for a $1.6 billion factory in Mexico to build compact cars, and diverting some of the investment to a plant near Detroit to produce electric vehicles. Ford stressed that this was a commercial decision. Donald Trump had criticized the proposed Mexican factory while campaigning on the theme of saving American jobs. Australian workplaces are increasingly suffering from depression, anxiety, and stress, according to a large study of mental health in corporate Australia. Mental illness appears to have increased by a third in the last decade. Depression is now the primary mental health disorder. Blue is the most popular color. Food researchers disagree. When humans searched for food, they learned to avoid toxic or spoiled objects, which were often blue, black, or purple. When food dyed blue is served to study subjects, they lose appetite.
Many papers you write in college will require you to include quotes from one or more sources. Even if you don't have to do it, integrating a few quotes into your writing can add life and persuasiveness to your arguments. The key is to use quotes to support a point you're trying to make rather than just include them to fill space.
The English Revolution has been interpreted in several ways by historians as a battle for power between Parliament and the monarchy over the rights of Englishmen that had been going on for centuries, and as a class war similar to the French Revolution, of which it was a forerunner. These establishments allow customers to pay an hourly fee for the chance to cuddle some cats. They're popular in Japan because so many apartment buildings forbid pet ownership. But Joya isn't a typical customer. She's not there for feline affection, but to probe their minds.
Being physically active benefits people's health significantly, including reducing the risk of some chronic conditions, helping to control weight, and improving mental health. In recent decades, there has been a decline in physical activity because more people work in offices rather than in manual jobs.
The usage variable remains a success variable of information systems if the user himself decides to adopt or reject the technology. However, for mandatory users, such as for ERP systems, the use of the technology is obvious. The success of information systems cannot, therefore, be measured by usage. Since its inception, the UN system has been working to ensure adequate food for all through sustainable agriculture. The majority of the world's poorest people live in rural areas of developing countries. They depend on agriculture and related activities for their livelihoods. This makes them particularly vulnerable to man-made and natural influences that reduce agricultural production. There will always be the exception, such as the murderous regime in Iraq, where the only safe strategy is to keep it in the isolation ward until it accepts the norms of international behavior, or the military dictatorship in Burma, which has persistently failed to respond to dialogue. It takes two to critically engage. Two sisters were at a dinner party when the conversation turned to upbringing. The elder sister started to say that her parents had been very strict and that she had been rather frightened of them. Her sister, younger by 2 years, interrupted in amazement. What are you talking about? She said our parents were very lenient.